How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to stop caring about what other people think. And I think this is a very important video to make because there's a lot of different ways to kind of take this discussion, and there's many things that we need to consider in order to actually create a productive benefit from this discussion. And also, I think I'm probably one of the best people to be talking about this because not only of my background in childhood, but also because I'm probably the pinnacle to a certain degree of not caring what people think, at least in a functional manner. At least that's what most people would say. Uh, so, anyway, let's begin. So, first of all, you have to understand generally with any of these types of overgeneralizations, right? Like, I don't care what people think, or I'm trying to be healthy, or what's the most optimal way to train, or how do I attach from the outcome. You have to first understand that this should not be the goal in and of itself, right? Because you don't get a fucking gold medal for just not caring what people think about you. So we have to think about what exactly is the benefit that I'm trying to get with this thought experiment of trying to stop caring what people think, okay? That's the first thing, okay? And generally speaking, it's not so it's important that you do take into consideration other people's criticism. One of the worst things that I see in a lot of people, especially people who are trying to be smart or trying to be, get into psychology or therapy or whatever, is there's a stigma against criticism and a stigma against judgment. And the first thing that you need to do if you want to relieve the attachment to other people's criticisms is what we're really looking for. We're looking for inner alchemy, like how do we feel about other people's thoughts, right? And the first thing you need to do to detach yourself from other people's opinions of you and criticisms and judgments is to understand that other people's criticisms, they are worth entertaining. Resistance, what you resist persists is generally the thing, but in reality, the main reason why people are so affected by other people's judgments is because they don't sit down and critically reflect on them. For me personally, I read what I consider stupid people's criticisms of me, and I think about it, and I'm like, is that valid? And I'll usually respond, and I try to respond in a civil, level-headed, balanced manner. Usually with questions too. I'm asking them for more information because I'm curious as to how they got to that perspective, right? That's the first thing. And then, of course, people that I respect, obviously, I pay very close attention to what they say. And the one thing that you don't want to do is if somebody is giving you criticism and it's not meant to be taken offensively, right? Like, they say, "Oh, your videos are okay. Like, you have a lot of good content. However, you tend to run on in directions and that lead nowhere. There's a lot of talking and less of you getting your point across." For example, right? That's a criticism I've had in the past. For me to be like, "Oh, fuck that. I don't care what people think," is so immature. And that is setting you up for failure. In order for you to succeed in any field, you need to be able to take those types of criticisms and at the very least respond in a friendly manner because they mean well. You need to welcome those criticisms because in order for you to go from an amateur to a pro, especially to an elite level master, those criticisms are what's going to help guide you there. So people who are like, "I don't give a fuck what people think," like that was a huge thing I used to hear when I was in high school or whatever, in middle school. People, they glorified the "I don't give a fuck" attitude, and they'd get necklaces that say IDGAF or whatever. I don't give a fuck. And to me, I'm like, man, that's just so. I've always recognized that as immature. And people who flip off the camera in their pictures, And there's a lot of adults that do that. They think they're cool, and it's just so I can't even. It's so cringy and disgusting to me because it reflects a low IQ, in my opinion. That's what it reflects. Yeah. So this whole idea that criticism and other people's opinions and judgments are bad is actually very. It's counterproductive. It's immature. It's intellectually lazy. However, so it's not so much about not caring what people think in general, or ignoring criticism, or whatever, disregarding criticism, or there's a lot of people that just overgeneralize and they don't really understand what the word criticism means, and they're like, criticism is bad, or do not criticize this person, blah blah blah. Criticism is how people get better. If you really want to improve your mental health, if you really want to improve your relationships, if you want to be able to effectively deal with friendships and relationships and social life, and if you want to effectively improve in your own life, you need to understand what real criticism looks like, and you need to be able to take all forms of criticism, and you need to be able to learn how in your own brain to interpret offensive criticisms too. Because if you're walking around in everyday life and people are telling you, they're talking crap to you, and you're just like a fragile, sensitive, ticking time bomb, and you're emotionally reacting to everybody who like purposely tries to offend you, that is a problem. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest problems in our society is we focus a lot on trying to make people feel comfortable by trying to cut down on uncomfortable antagonism. So instead of being able to have freedom of speech, even if it hurts, we're trying to safeguard everybody. But the problem with that is it's futile. Okay? It's futile. What I find the easiest thing to do, the most effective thing to do, and the most surefire way for you to improve as an individual and to develop the skills you need to effectively live in the social sphere of this world is to try to become bulletproof emotionally and cognitively, to where these people's criticisms, they stick with you if they're productive and constructive, or if they're meant to be offensive or whatever, they bounce off you because you recognize someone who's purposely telling you something to offend you. That is not your problem. Like, that is their problem. Someone who's talking down on you because you have a mental illness, or, and I mean literally talking down on you, because I've made videos where I'm talking about a famous bodybuilder like Vince Garanda. I have a video where I talk about him dying of a heart attack, and I'm specifically focusing on what might have been the causes that led up to his heart issue. And there's people on there that take that offensively, and they're like, "You don't even know the guy, you hater," and they're like talking all this crap to me. When my video is very constructive, it's logically dissecting his lifestyle and diet and supplementation and the things we know about how he lived his life, to try to figure out how he got to the health outcomes he did, because that's useful information. But so many, and they're usually grown men who are like in his era. They're like 60, 70 years old, and they're freaking out at me in internet comments from like anonymous profiles. So you have to understand what constructive kind of reflection and criticism and judgment is. That's productive. I'm trying to advance health science by taking a look at what was the cause of his, unfortunate death. But they're like, "Oh no, that's like harmful to his reputation and this and that." It's like, no, not really, because I'm trying to, if anything, I'm defending his diet. He ate a bunch of eggs and low carb and this and that. And I'm like, well, it might have been the supplements, might have not been of his diet, And they're like, no, like, so, yeah, if someone's like, someone has depression, for example, and, me, I can easily talk about that because I was diagnosed with way worse mental illness, in and out of mental hospitals when I was a child. And, if a friend of mine has depression, and I'm like, hey, you know, I notice that you have these behaviors that you engage in every single day. And those behaviors tend to be the most prominent underlying causes of depression. You might want to try to, you know, substitute those behaviors with some more beneficial behaviors. Like instead of drinking sugar soda, drink diet soda. Instead of staying in your house all day or staying in your bed all day when you can, you know, that usually makes people feel depressed. You should go out, exercise, go hang out with a friend, you know. And of course, I know it's, you know, that's easier said than done. Those are just examples, but the depressed person can either be like, you know what, you're probably right, and it's really hard for me to do that, and we can have a productive discussion and try to actually have a cathartic discussion where we iron out some strategies to help that person move forward. But other people are just, you know, they're just like, no, you don't know my depression, screw you, you know. Like he's criticizing me, and it's like, so a lot of people, they can't even recognize like constructive criticism, and they take offense to things that are harmless. So yeah, a lot of people need to actually consider opinions, and that's actually a huge problem. Okay, just like with so many different things, people are focusing on the opposite of what they need to focus on. So let's see. You know, another thing is like nutrition and, you know, like if I'm eating like a mostly meat diet, for example, people comment on my channel, they might be vegans or whatever. These days, I like, you know, there's certain comments that irritate me because I've already considered the science behind them, right? So people will be like, oh, your cholesterol's through the roof, you fucking idiot, you know, LDL cholesterol, blah, blah, blah. Don't you know that meat is a main contributor? And meanwhile, so those comments, the thing is, I've already thought about the science. I have videos on the science. I've been studying that topic probably for a decade longer than this person. So why would I get angry at what they say, and why would I respond angrily? And also, why would I consider their opinion? I've already considered that, right? So I'll consider these people who, you know, but other carnivore people, they're like, no, like you're the idiot and blah, blah, blah. And they freak out at them. Don't you know that LDL cholesterol and this and that? That is so unproductive. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. So yeah, and it just stresses you out, you know. Maybe we can have you know, sometimes I'll ask them, I'm like, well, do you know any studies that I'm not aware of? And they usually send me a study I've already read and made a video about. So, you know, so that's an example of, you know, people's opinions you probably shouldn't care about after you've reflected on the evidence and the actual information content they've given you. But I have videos where people will comment and they'll just say, ew, that's a shit diet, you know, you're dumb or something. And I'll ask them, I'll ask them for the logic behind their comment. I'll be like, hey, could you kind of like give some context and explanation as to how you got to that perspective? That way, you know, other people who see your comment can extract value from what you have to say. 9 times out of 10, they won't do it, and if they do, they just continue to just talk shit with personal attacks. So, and this is the internet we're talking about. In person, this is a thing. You know, I'm giving a lot of examples from the internet. I don't have a lot of. I mean, these days, I don't have a lot of examples of, you know, people who literally said something that I can remember as, oh, that was like offensive or meant to be offensive or whatever. And I think a big part of that is, number one, I have, you know, the first thing I talked about, considering people's opinions. I don't get offended anymore because it's like either your criticism has some, you know, some real tangible value to it, or it's completely meaningless to me. You know, I have, you know, like people still in 2022, they'll comment and they'll like, oh, you're bald, haha, like, And to me, that used to just irritate me, not because I'm bald, but because they think that that is worth commenting about, or they think that I should be offended by it or something. And to me, I view that as just extremely irrational. And I'm just like, I want to know more about that person. I want to know, is that person mentally sane? Do they have a fulfilling life of some kind? Like, I want to know, why is it that they're fixating on my baldness, and why is it that they expect me to actually value their opinion, right? Because to me, that comment doesn't have a lot of real tangible value that I could use. And I'm like, why waste your time making that comment? And so what I'm always trying to extract value from the things people say. I'm always trying to understand what people say, right? But a lot of times people don't even know why they're saying what they're saying. People don't reflect on it, right? So this is the thing, is like, instead of like, oh, I don't give a fuck what people think, you should be seeking the value and the meaning behind what they say, especially if it's idiotic. Because when you start to understand idiotic opinions or criticisms, and I mean real idiocy. So this is another problem, is like, in politics, and nutrition science. Okay, so let's look at politics, just an example. I've seen this with family members where they're like, oh, that person believes in the other president. They're an idiot. That person believes the opposite belief of me. They're stupid. And they don't view other people as intelligent or not intelligent based on actual qualities of intelligence. They view other people as stupid or whatever, or based on how much do I agree with what they're saying. And that in and of itself is a trap that keeps you stuck in nonsense, dogma, being in an echo chamber. That is something I think that needs to be, that is a personal issue that needs to be understood. And the other thing, and this to me, this is why I tend to just let go and almost give up on other people and their nonsense. The majority of people that I see in the world, they suffer from that problem, and can't overcome it. And I think that's one of the biggest human traps of fulfillment, of intelligence, and just how the hell do you not see that that's you just trying to reinforce your own dogma? And this is scary to me because I had my previous psychologist who was awesome on all other fronts. He specialized in gifted children. He was the one who made me realize having 149 IQ in the second grade is actually an important factor to consider for my mental health, because it affects how I relate to other people pretty dramatically. Well, this guy, I don't want to say anything bad about him, but I noticed he followed under this complex. When we were talking about people who had a different ideology or belief than him, immediately he's like, oh, that's an IQ problem. Those people have a low IQ. And of course, I tried to dig deeper, and he was emotionally triggered by it, didn't want to expand further. But to me, it's very important because I want to know, where is that comment coming from? You know what I mean? Because I don't want to just believe, oh, this guy is this is dogma speaking, right? I want to know for sure, given the benefit of the doubt, where exactly is that comment coming from? And eventually he kind of dug a little bit deeper. He's like, oh, I didn't mean to offend you. No, you didn't offend me. I just want to know, are you operating from dogma, or did you actually critically think about that, right? Because to say, oh, and I don't want to get too deep, in what he said, but, it's that person's medical choice is because he's a low IQ is kind of what they said, basically. And then he's like, oh, well, it's based on statistics and the regions in which these people are living in, they are low IQ states and this and that. And to me, it's just an overgeneralization that makes him feel like his thought is more superior. So a lot of people's opinions are to make them feel superior is something we need to understand. And I'm not saying that that was his thing. I needed to have a deeper conversation, but I was getting those vibes that this is a superiority complex that most people can't rise above, where it's like, I'm carnivore. All vegans are dumb. If you eat plants, you're dumb or whatever. Or like the vegans, like, I'm vegan. If you eat meat, you're more morally inferior and this and that. You're dumb because you're going to get heart disease and whatever. It's a superiority complex a lot of times. Like, you're dumb because you believe this and that. So anyway, this is very important to understand, because the majority of people who will tell you, so remember, there are people like me, because I'm very blunt usually, and I love giving constructive criticism, and that's most of my job. Most people, they run away from the shit that they need to hear, and they gravitate towards the things that reinforce the things and make them feel comfortable or whatever. And even people you think are smart, they abide by this shit. They want to reinforce their dogma, their confirmation bias, and they don't want to expand beyond their dogma. They're not open to information that might, make them question, even if they know that person has 149 IQ like me, which it's just, but the thing is, though, the emotions pop up. It's an emotional thing. Most people's opinions are emotional. They're not reflective, critically, analyzed. They're not having a good time discussing the philosophy like I am right now. I find this shit, what's the word? Amusing. I find it amusing and a little bit bothersome and catastrophic at the same time. Let's see. So, yeah, that's a huge thing when you're thinking about criticisms and other people's opinions. So, and it's important not to just automatically assume that other people are operating from dogma, because, you got to really, really think about it, right? Anyway, I've done some things that have allowed me to just completely, detach from the material world and all the judgments associated with it. And I'll have to talk about that in another video, but when you understand opinions, right? A lot of people, for example, in exercise science, I know a lot of people that, they're afraid of heavy lifting, like lifting weights. And so, they're like, oh, I don't lift weights because I'm afraid of hurting my back. I just do kettlebells and Bosu ball exercises and this and that. Or I just do upper body bodybuilding. And then, even when I worked as a commercial gym as a personal trainer, I had old people, I had soccer moms, I had, 14-year-old athletes, I had 70-something-year-old clients. I had them back squatting, deadlifting, and their back pain would go away and all this stuff. And I'd have these, big kind of fat people, these people who are just regular gym goers who didn't really train properly, and they're just always doing chest and whatnot. And they're telling me, oh, I don't squat because it hurts my back. And they're just shaking their head at me. And one time even came up to me and they're like, I can't believe you have that old person doing a squat. Don't you know that that's bad for the back? You're going to injure them. And it's they haven't actually studied this. They don't actually understand the mechanics of the squat and this and that, because they're viewing the world through their own limited experience. And they may have hurt themselves because they just train dumb, straight up. And, so their whole idea of back squatting is based on their limited experience of being stupid, of training stupid, legitimately training in a way that hurt them. And they think it's the back squat that hurt them, right? And so me listening to that, I have to understand that this person is just, disconnected from the intelligent way of doing things, basically. And they lack understanding. And usually they're just so emotional and attached to their own nonsense. Nothing I say can help them. They're just fucked, basically. And the same thing applies to nutrition, for example. Um, let's see. So like ketogenic diets, for example. Every single time I do this, I don't know why I can't just accept it. When I eat a lot of carbs, I measure my intake, I do it all properly. I follow evidence-based practices, and I'm eating, 200, 300 grams of carbs a day because I'm an athlete and this and that. Get my potassium from bananas, whatever. And I can't sleep when I eat a lot of carbs, and I recognize this is not a normal phenomena. So I go keto, and I notice my athletic performance improves. I notice my sleep improves. Now, the thing is, most people that are not familiar with keto and this and that, and some of the problems some people have with carbs, they'll be like, oh, you're full of crap, it's a placebo effect and this and that. Because all that they know in their limited perspective is the science that's done on carb-adapted humans. And then all the low-carb, the keto science that they know is done on people who have been carb-adapted all their life, trying to transition to keto for 2 weeks. So they don't understand that keto literally requires like 4 weeks before their body starts absorbing ketones, and then there's metabolic shifts that take place and upregulate the amount of fat they can burn per minute, and the VO2 max threshold in which they can burn more fat. Their whole perspective is like, oh, that chart, you can only burn carbs after 70% of your VO2 max. Not understanding that there's a metabolic adaptation that takes place the longer you stay on a keto diet, the same way that there is a metabolic shift that takes place in an adaptation period when you begin a strength training routine. You don't just start squatting for 2 weeks, heavy, 5x5, and then like, oh, I'm golden, I'm adapted. No, you're sore as shit the first 2 weeks. You're weak as hell. You might have some weird aches and pains or some exhaustion or whatever. But then after, it takes 3 to 4 weeks, and eventually your body gets better at generating energy in those thresholds, and the amount of force you can produce at a certain heart rate or whatever metric you're using, it improves as you adapt. But people don't think this way because they have one perspective that they've grown up in and they've been taught in college to believe, and so they view keto through that lens. And so when you're disconnected from the fact that this is how perspectives work and this is how your beliefs work, and then you're like, oh, everyone else who believes something else is stupid. Those keto dieters are stupid. Those freaking vegan people are stupid, whatever. And this is the majority of humans, and I just feel very lonely. I feel very lonely because I'm like, no one is operating at this level. What the fuck? And the people that are, they're those floaty yoga people who are like, oh yeah, man, just like anything works, bro. You just gotta believe in it. It's the power of the mind, bro, or whatever. Or like, remove the ego and everything is good. It's like, can we like actually use our brain and like think through this or whatever? But yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna end this video here because I don't know. I went way off the original topic, and I'll talk to y'all next time.